Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome. My name is Seeta Gangadharan, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Media and Communications here at the LSE, and I joined the LSE in 2015.
And my name is Mansell. I'm a full professor in the Department of Media and Communications here at the LSE, and I joined the LSE in 2001.
So I'm going to be your host for today, everyone. It's a little bit unusual to not be able to see you, but I'm going to briefly outline the format for today's webinar. Before that, I am just going to bring your attention to one of the features of this conferencing system that we're using today. If you look at the navigation menu where it says participants, you should see an option for Q&A. So I'll just give you a second to explore that. We would like you to post any questions you have in the Q&A section, and please feel free to start typing and submitting your questions either anonymously or with your real name starting now. So that'll help us get ready for the Q&A, which will take place later on. And if you have any questions regarding the webinar platform, we encourage you to use the chat function, and you can direct your chats to me, Seeta Gangadharan, so I can field them while this webinar is ongoing. As to the format, I'll hand it over to Robin, our head of department, to briefly say a few words about the job call. She's going to speak for about 5 minutes, sharing some information about the nature of this open specialism call and other details that were frequently asked. I'll then speak for about 7 minutes about what it's like to work at the LSE, and then we'll move directly into the Q&A. And hopefully by then you will have already begun posing questions, which we'll queue up and respond to in turn. We'll wrap no later than 10 a.m. British Summer Time. In the event that we have a high volume of questions, we may switch between audio and text-based answers, but generally speaking, we'll invite you to write your questions, which we'll repeat and then answer live. Please be aware we are recording this webinar and plan to make the audio available following our second webinar, which will take place next week, the 11th of October at 4 p.m. British Summer Time. Robin, do you have anything to add regarding the webinar process?
No, I just encourage people to start asking questions, and I'm happy to go on and talk a little bit more about the post and why we're having the webinar in the first place. We want to attract as many people to apply to the post as possible, because we are very hopeful that we will attract a diverse set of people with backgrounds which are from different points on the compass when it comes to media and communication studies. We held a in-person seminar at the IAMCR conference in Cartagena in the summer, which allowed people to ask us questions about basically what do we look for when we look at an application, should you decide to submit one. And that was really interesting, because the questions that came our way were ones which are perfectly legitimate to ask, and we did the best we could to answer them. In terms of the job itself, as you will have seen from the job advert, it's open specialism, which means that anyone who can persuade themselves and us that they work and undertake research and teaching broadly in the field of media and communications is welcome to apply for this job. Why are we not saying specifically what specialism we're looking for? The reason is because we are a very interdisciplinary department, and we are looking for excellence in research and teaching wherever we find it. Many people asked at the in-person session, can you tell me whether you would welcome my application because I work in a particular subfield of media and communications? And our answer was always, we're not looking for a very specific specialism. So that is a strong message coming from this department as we recruit for a new professor. The post starts on the 1st of September 2018. And that means that anyone who applies, if you're wondering whether you should, will need to have completed their PhD. And they will need to be able to have referees who attest to the fact that they've completed. They will need to be interested in anything related to the interdisciplinary field of media and communications. And they must be able to demonstrate excellence and a proven commitment to critical reflexive theory and empirical research. And beyond that, you're welcome to apply, and we look forward to your questions. And I'm going to hand back to Seeta now. I can't hear her.
I was on mute. Apologies for that. Hello again. As I mentioned at the start, I joined the LSE in September of 2015. Before joining the LSE, I worked at a think tank, and I also held a postdoc before that at an American university. I also completed my PhD at an American university, and so that's just to contextualize my comments. So I'm coming from a slightly different environment, arriving to UK university, and I just want to run through 3 or 4 main things that stood out for me in the process of applying, and that I think will, that I hope will be helpful to you. So those 4 things are talking about teaching load. Second, talking about teaching certification. Third, a little bit about the student body, the composition of the students here that we see in the department, and just the orientation of the department. So first, unlike some places which calculate teaching loads in terms of number of courses you will teach per semester, the LSE calculates teaching loads in terms of the number of contact hours or amount of face-to-face time you will have with students across the academic year. Before the major review, which is when you're up for promotion and tenure, you will teach a percentage of the full load of teaching here at the LSE. And the full load is, I think, approximately 110 hours. Your lectures, the seminars you lead, guest lecturing you do in other courses offered in the department. This face-to-face time is calculated across our 3 terms, which comprise the academic year. Those terms are Michaelmas term, or fall term, Lent term, otherwise known as spring term, and summer term. Most people lecture in the Michaelmas and Lent terms, since summer terms are when exams take place. Additionally, you will hold office hours and supervise dissertations. If you teach on a course that has an exam, you will likely offer what's called a revision lecture in the summer term. Otherwise, all seminar teaching takes place in the Michaelmas and Lent terms. Regarding teaching certification, when you teach at a UK university, you are required to get a sort of teaching certification. It is called the Postgraduate Certificate in Higher Education, otherwise known as the PG Cert. This certification is portable to any other university in postgrad institution in the United Kingdom. And just so you're aware, to receive the certification, you must enroll in a course that it's called the PG Cert course, and it's taught by LSE faculty. It's typically in the first year you will take this course, though some people wait till their second year to take the course. And it allows you to develop, improve, reflect upon your pedagogical technique, your teaching philosophy, and teaching excellence more broadly. The course meets once a week in the Michaelmas and Lent terms. Student body, just a quick word. So in our department, we are a postgraduate only department. So we do not teach any undergraduates. This year, we admitted 271 master's students and 12 new PhD students, which is higher than previous years. That's just so you know, overall, our rate of growth will likely stabilize over the next few years to come. So we have been growing, but we're going to stabilize. The master's program, with the exception of our joint master's programs that take place with the University of Southern California, Cape Town University, and Fudan University, with the exception of those 3 joint master's programs, our master's programs last 1 year. Students will submit a master's thesis or a dissertation, as it's called here, of 10 to 12,000 words at the end of the summer. Most PhD researchers here complete their PhDs within 4 years. And I say all of this, again, coming from a different academic context. I say all of this because we do not teach undergraduates. Graduate teaching assistantships are somewhat rare in our department. We use graduate teaching assistants, or what other people call TAs, to lead workshops, such as methodology workshops, and to advise students on their dissertation progress, especially during the summer term. This means, as a course convener or a course teacher, you and not a TA will grade or assess your students' coursework. I'm going to try and wrap my comments because I know I already see a number of questions that are coming up in the Q&A section. Just a word about our faculty profile. We are not we're not an abstract place. We are both theoretically and empirically driven. Our work on the whole tends towards the critical communication tradition, though, as Robin said, we really do pride ourselves on our multidisciplinary approach, and we really look forward to continuing our commitment to diversity in the department and in how we approach the study of media communications. I feel like I should stop there because, again, I'm starting to see a number of questions and hopefully some of my other thoughts and observations and comparisons can come up in some of the responses. So we'll switch gears now and open the remainder of the Q&A, of the webinar to Q&A. And as a reminder, I see some Q&A, some questions have already been posted, but in case you missed that part of the webinar, please do click on Q&A in your navigation panel and submit your question by text through the webinar interface. And we're going to address those questions live on audio. So Robin, do you want to start with addressing some of the questions that you see?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you, Seeta. That was a really good introduction. I hope it will prompt lots more questions. What Seeta didn't say was that we think the department is a wonderful place to work, and that's why we're trying to attract you to apply for this job. So the first question that's been asked is whether or not you need to have completed the PhD by the time you enter the post, and if you are defending your thesis or having your viva anytime between when the post starts and now, then you are qualified to apply for the post. It's just an absolute deadline that you must have completed by the 1st of September 2018. I should say that we also have another assistant professor post, which will be advertised in September 2018 to start the following year. So if you're not quite finished your PhD, there'll be another opportunity for you the following year. Michael asks what I think, or we think, the most valuable kind of collaboration is when you're working at a university like the LSE in the heart of London. Is it in the department? Is it in the university itself? Or is it national, international? And I suppose sort of a woolly answer is that it's all of those. Depending on your focus of your research and your empirical work, some people in the department do focus very much on things going on in London, but often London in a global context. Other people have a horizon for their research, and their empirical research takes place overseas. We really value collaborations within the department amongst our faculty. We currently have around 22 full-time academic staff and quite a lot more researchers and some guest teachers. So there are many opportunities together with visiting people to collaborate. We also collaborate internationally, of course. So what's the most valuable? It depends on you and what your focus of research and teaching is. Another question is, are we looking for people who apply with lots of postdoctoral experience or have previously held a lectureship? We realize that people apply to an assistant professorship here at the LSE with a whole variety of backgrounds and experience levels. We welcome people who are just finishing and people who have had some experience. We will look for research excellence wherever we find it. We may find it in a chapter of your PhD thesis if you chose to submit that. We may find it in a publication in a top-ranked journal. We may find it in the fact that you demonstrate in your letter of application that despite the fact you may not have had too much experience, you really have proven yourself as a leader in terms of course design. So we understand that a range of people's backgrounds will be present in your application forms. And so no, we're not looking only for somebody with a great deal of experience or somebody with just finishing a PhD. Someone else is asking about visas. Yes, visas always are a problem for coming to the UK. Should you be appointed to this position, the school will do its absolute best to make a case for your visa, because we will argue that you are the most specialized and competent person to take up this post in our department at the LSE in the UK. Of course, there are no guarantees, but in that sense, we will work with you to apply for, I think it's called a Tier 2 visa. In terms, should you be, we go through a long listing stage. If we got to the short listing stage and you are actually invited for an in-person interview, then I think that the letter of invitation will help you to get the visa to be able to come for the interview. And we do expect people, except in unusual circumstances, to appear here in London for the interview. Perhaps I should say a little bit about that process. The way it works is that we receive applications. We go through a process of reducing those applications down to somewhere between 4 and 6 people who will be shortlisted. And there will be notification of that in good time. Next question that's asked is your teaching growth primarily at the MA or PhD level? What kind of supervision is most important for you in the next 5 years? As Seeta said, we're a postgraduate only department, so no undergraduate teaching, which means insofar as there is growth in student numbers, it's mainly at the master's level. We normally have an intake of PhDs of about somewhere between 6 and 11 or 12, as happened this year, each year. So the growth is mainly at the MA level, but it's not a steep upward trajectory because we attempt to manage to targets. and accept students to our various master's programs. And this year, I'm really proud to say that we hit exactly the number of students that we wanted to attract, which is around 200, and I can't remember what Seeta said, 60 something. So that won't shoot up tremendously. The kind of teaching and supervision that's most important, as an assistant professor, you will be expected to teach lectures, run seminars, do the marking, as Seeta said, and also supervise master's dissertations, we call them in this country. I know people call them theses elsewhere, but master's dissertations, which are around 12,000 words each. You will have the opportunity in your first years to be a second supervisor of PhDs so that you can become a PhD supervisor in training. After a period of years, if you pass the review stage, then you will be allowed to supervise as a first supervisor. But in reality, all supervision is between two people in our department and in the LSE. Every student has two supervisors. So if you have more experience as a supervisor already, then you will be able to initiate more as a second supervisor. How much experience does the position acquire? I kind of answered that one already. It needs you to be a confident, present yourself as a confident researcher and teacher. But depending on your life experience and when you started to do your master's, you may have a great deal of confidence, just like somebody who's been in the teaching world for some time.
Can I add to that just quickly?
Yeah.
Because there is a person specification document. It lists the essential and desired qualifications of the candidate. And it's good to run through each of those and think about and articulate how you meet those specifications.
That's right. You should pay particular attention to those. And when you're writing your letter of application, if you address yourself to each of the points, the essential conditions and the desirable conditions, basically paragraph by paragraph in a sense, then you'll make sure that you tell us all the things we need to know in order to set your application higher up in the pile. There's a question about how do we see the future development of the department. This department is very fortunate in being ranked as the top UK research-led Department of Media and Communications from the last evaluation exercise they did in this country. And I think in the QS World Rankings, we were 3rd in 2017. So basically the future of the development of the department is to stay there, not fall down the rankings. In teaching, we can be interested in continuous improvement, strengthening our processes, strengthening our contributions to the student experience, ensuring that all people teach to their strengths in the department. So although the department will continue to grow at a very modest pace, adding a post, one post or so over the next couple of years, probably not annually. Being a mid-sized department, which is what we are in the LSE, is where we like to be, and I think where we will continue to be for some time. As we attract new staff, as we will do in this current appointment, if that new person's specialism is complementary to what is already here, we will begin to build strength in a new area. If it is similar to something that we already do here, then we will deepen our strength in an area. So just to take an example, people who are interested in socio-technical studies of big data and algorithmic surveillance, if somebody was to be attracted to the department now, we already have people working in that area, so we would deepen. But if it was somebody who was very active in the area of film studies, for example, which is something we don't do a great deal of in our department now, then we would begin to deepen into that area. How much research support does the position come with? There is what I would describe, I suppose, compared to some North American universities, modest support for travel to conferences. It's about £880 annually per year. Of course, if you win research grants, you can use some of that funding to travel. We also have a departmental fund which allows people to bid for bootstrapping projects to get ready to bid for external funding. And so all people in the department are entitled to bid for those funds to the research committee. The amounts have varied over time from, say, £1,000 to transcribe some interviews to somewhat more, maybe up to £5,000 in order to do a slightly more robust starter grant to, as I said, prepare you. Other research support comes from the center of the school, where our personnel who handle the whole process of putting in grants applications do an enormously good job in helping us with things like finance and budgets. In addition, each person who works in the department is assigned a more senior mentor who is there to help and guide and support in developing both your research and teaching. So I hope that gives you something of an answer. What is the difference between the level of an assistant professor and associate professor? An associate professor is basically seen as the entry level into the academic ladder. An associate professor, by contrast, will have published in top leading journals in the Media and Communications department. We do have a list which the school recognizes. It's quite a long list, actually. But it would include journals like New Media and Society and a range of other journals. So you will expect to have demonstrated that your work is being internationally recognized in order to become an associate professor. You will have demonstrated excellence in teaching based on feedback from students, innovation in course design, and you may have begun to be prepared to take on a leadership role as a director of an MSc program, or perhaps someone who has been able to demonstrated they can attract substantial research funding. So there's a whole cluster of criteria which we use in order to assess whether someone is ready to take that step to associate professor. The way it works at the LSE is from the point of appointment, date of appointment as an assistant professor, you have actually got 8 years to what we call major review and promotion to associate professor. If you come to us with a considerable background, somebody who has been out teaching and working for some years, it is perfectly possible to move that date up. The latest date is 8 years. So it could happen in year 5, etc. It depends on your publication record, your teaching record, and your fundraising record. Yes, go ahead.
If I can, sorry, add, I know that we're talking about the differences between assistant and associate, but I just want to underscore what your first, I just want to interject with what your first year might be like at the LSE, just so you can kind of scope your temporal, just what your journey here might be like. And that's to say, your first year here will be very busy. It's really helpful. I think actually, Robin, you guided me with this single piece of advice. Identify one goal that you might have for your first year coming in as an assistant professor and try and reach that goal. And there will be plenty of opportunity to deepen and develop yourself professionally as you move through the process leading to major review.
Okay, thanks, Seeta. Okay. So a very good question is, do we pay for people to attend the interviews in London? No, sadly, we do not. And this is obviously a challenge for people who come from backgrounds where they don't have a high level of resources. So
The next question, just so you're aware, Robin, Luisa Magalhães has a two-part question, a little bit of context, it seems. So she has a couple of statements. And Luisa, if I could just ask you to type in your question specifically, because we see a couple of notes, but not necessarily a question. So in the meantime, maybe Robin, you can move to the next question and we'll wait for Luisa to post her question.
Okay, somebody is asking again about the assistant associate professor divide. And then you add, it's sounding more of a junior position than it seemed in the person description and person specification. Well, it wasn't my intention to say it was junior. It's entry level in the sense that it's not associate professor. I don't know how else to put it. But assistant professors come, as has already been recognized, with a range of experience. It doesn't necessarily mean we pick the person who has the most years of experience, because again, I emphasize we're looking for research excellence in teaching wherever we find it, and that means we look for potential. So we may see potential, which is not demonstrated by, for example, 6 or 7 years of already teaching. And if somebody hasn't got those years of experience in another university, clearly they're going to be on a learning pathway, which is different and earlier. Somebody who has experience already. So what are your students excited about studying? What are some of their topics right now? That's a huge question, but I guess if you go to our website and you look at the titles of our degree programs, that gives you a hint of the sorts of things that excite them. So we have, for example, a strand on governance, where students come who are hugely excited about trying to understand how governance and regulation and policy happen in the digital environment. Other students come to do our development and communications degree, and there they are hugely excited about studying issues of what gives rise to inequality and social injustice, and how does the media and the communication environment contribute to that. Some students are doing our political and communications degree, and they're just fascinated by the role of online media, for example, in changing the political process. Some people would argue in undermining democracy, other people would say enabling direct democracy, but whichever way you see it, they come with a commitment to understanding that. Everyone doesn't come in the door with a dissertation topic. Some students wait several months, which is fine with us, to come up with a topic. Other students come in the door saying, I have always wanted to know about why it is that, for example, Google is so unaccountable to civil society because it has set its algorithms, etc. And that's what they want to know about. So they want to study and do some empirical research about how users experience the algorithmic world that we live in today. It's just one example. So the topics range across the subject matter of our MSCs. The one thing that we do require of students is that they find a way of developing a conceptual framework which touches on theories that are recognizably within the media and communications world. But that doesn't mean that they need to exclude sociology or politics or anthropology or studies that are a little bit closer to the digital arts and humanities. Although we are social science, it's not that we exclude humanities. So I think that's, rather than listing the hundreds of topics, that's an easiest way to answering your question. We have a website at our department, which is the list of the dissertations each year, which have got higher than 70% or distinction. And those are published there. And there are sets of maybe 15 to 20 of them every year. So if you're interested in the topics, you can go through and scan all the titles.
Great. Robin, if I can just, for the purposes of recording, there was a question that was a little bit higher up in the queue, asking, is it 110 hours per year or per semester? And that's 110 hours per year. And I just wanted to say that so that it's on the recording and not in the chat room. But yeah, we had a question about that. And then I think also, in terms of the question that was posed by Luisa Magalhães, I will try and paraphrase it, but the question is broadly about an assistant someone who already has an assistant professorship, but is has been in a mainly administrative capacity. Should I apply to this job? And maybe I can just stress again, and then you can continue, Robin, to say that it is really important that you look at the person specification and the person description and just run through those points to see, are you matching with the sorts of things that we're asking for in this open call? Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so. I think that's the best answer that we can give. There's a question here about how does the probationary period work and how do we advance in our position? The process is a little bit different than North American universities, but similar in other ways. So the probationary period is one in which, as I said earlier, from appointment, you have 8 years before you must be put forward for promotion to associate professor or major review. Somewhere in that period, I think it's 4 years, there's what's called an interim review, where you will submit your publications to that point, your teaching experience to that point, and what we call service or citizenship contributions to the department, to the promotions committee in the school, which is a central committee. You will be advised and mentored along the way, and you will be put through that interim review process, which will guide you into the next phase, which is the major review process and promotion to associate professor. If you're promoted to associate professor, it means that you have been deemed to have internationally recognized research publications and excellent teaching. As you progress through that to the point of full professor, by the time you apply for that, which could be, there is no fixed number of years, but I would say on average somewhere between 5 and 7 or 8 years, you will need to then convince the school that you have at least 2 world-leading publications. And world-leading means even beyond internationally recognized. Your publications are stellar and your teaching is also excellent. So the details of how you go through that probationary period are not probably appropriate to discuss in detail here, but that gives you a broad overview. Scrolling down here.
And we have a couple of questions that have repeated themselves, but I think the next one is about teaching experience.
Yeah.
Are
we likely to appoint a candidate who has a PhD but doesn't have any teaching experience? They have extensive field-based and practitioner-like experience. I can't give an absolute answer to that in the sense that I would not say we would never appoint anybody without any teaching experience. We say that's the desirable characteristic. But it would seem to me that given the fact that applicants on the whole will have teaching experience, it's unlikely that we would necessarily appoint somebody who doesn't have any teaching experience. That isn't asked, but you might be wondering, what if I've only taught at the undergraduate level and you only have postgraduate or master's level teaching? It is perfectly possible to imagine that undergraduate teaching experience will seem to us to be translatable into early career competence at the master's level. So it isn't out of the question that we would appoint somebody with undergraduate only teaching experience. Do you see any openings at the associate prof level? No, not in the short term or a medium term. This is because the school prefers new entry to be at the earlier stage so that we don't end up with a large number of middle and full professors. So I doubt that we'll see associate level appointees in the coming period. The first review, there's a question here about when is the first review. I think the maximum is 4 years. It too can be pulled forward for interim review if you have been exceptionally active and demonstrated to the professoriate committee in the department that you are ready to be put forward. Let's see, I'm just scrolling down here. Again, the question about PhD in hand by the 1st of September. This means in hand, completed.
There's no exception to that.
There isn't, I'm afraid. Go ahead, Seeta.
Sorry, I'm just reading the chat room, monitoring 2 feeds at the same time. There's a slight correction to the question of interview expenses. And we've double checked, and these are in fact covered, flight, hotel, etc. if you are invited to the interview stage. And there's a link in the chat room with, for example, the kind of expense claim details for an interview. So again, there's a correction. We did some double checking, and we do cover some interview expenses such as flight, hotel, etc.
Well, that's very good news. My apologies. I did get advised, but I obviously was not right. So I'm very happy to hear that we do cover interview expenses, because clearly that makes it more equitable for people to come from different parts of the world. Good. Question, are we using the US tenure system, or is this the job from the very beginning a permanent position? It's not identical to the US tenure system in the sense that in the US tenure is tenure. Here, we don't call it tenure, we call it a permanent position, which means exactly what it says, a permanent position. But that permanency does not occur until you have passed your interim review, I believe. And so up until then, it is possible for it not to be a permanent position. And that means once it is, that it's effectively like tenure. Keep forgetting to scroll down here.
And I'll just say, as Robin is scrolling down and looking at the questions, yes, it is a different, it's both familiar and different for those of you that are coming from the United States. But just, remember that there are very clear mile markers for you along the way, I would say, in the process that exists here in the United Kingdom. As you go from, just starting out through the interim review to major review.
But to be clear, this is effectively like a North American tenure track post, in the sense that it isn't the case that we're just hiring you for 1 year on a temporary contract that might be renewed for 2 years, etc. If you are hired to this position, the expectation is that as long as you work hard and perform well, that you will progress through the system. And I must say, the great majority of people do. It's not like North America. I keep saying North America because I'm a Canadian, so I don't always think about the US system. I know there quite often junior people are appointed, so maybe 5 people might be appointed to a position in a department, but everybody knows there's only going to be 2 permanent positions or tenured positions in the end. So it's competitive. Here, you're competing basically against yourself. You're being benchmarked against others in terms of excellence and quality. But if you are appointed to this position, no one else will come and dump you out of it because they worked harder or longer or something like that. Another question about cost, do we cover the cost of relocation expenses? And there I can confidently say yes. There are guidelines about what is covered and how much is covered, but yes, the school is quite generous in covering relocation expenses.
And just to add, you will find it helpful to be in touch with HR when you get to that stage, and it's all very explicit what the guidelines are.
Yeah. So
there was an earlier question, sorry, Robin, in case you didn't catch it, and it was about, this question about, unless I missed it, the one about having a PhD in hand by September 1st. Does this mean defended or submitted for Viva? And how firm of a criterion is this for applicants? Did I miss this and you've already answered this?
I think I attempted to answer it. It is absolutely firm. You will have had your Viva. You will have, if you had to do revisions in some systems, not all, in Europe, you would probably have to do revisions if you've had your formal defense. You will have had either the formal defense or a Viva, and if you had revisions, you will have completed them, and your revised thesis would have been submitted, and it would have been confirmed that it has passed. In other words, we need absolutely to know that you have passed. I hope that clarifies. Is the list of target journals for promotion available to browse? No, it's not. I think the reason is that all departments in the school are asked to create lists of what they think are top journals, but unlike some places in the world, we are not driven by any professional association's top list of journals. So because we are an interdisciplinary department in the school, we again look for excellence where we find it. And so our list of journals is continuously being modified as journals rise and fall in terms of their excellence, but also as people come and go and bring different fields of expertise. So we have journals that are mentioned in subfields, like policy, for example, or cultural studies kinds of journals, or what else do we have? Political communications types of journals, and some development-oriented types of journals, because we obviously have specialisms in the department where you couldn't really come up with a list of the top 5 journals like business schools tend to do. And we do pay attention to impact factors. So basically the answer is that if it's broadly a journal in the media and communications field or subfields, and it is regarded as a good journal because of its impact factors, or because it simply has developed a high reputation in the community of scholars internationally, which is true of 1 or more open access online journals these days. That's what we do. So no, I can't tell you what is the particular journals that you must have published in.
And as Robin is looking at the other questions, I just want to draw your attention to, there are a few additional links in the chat room to the relocation policy. Okay,
thank you, Seeta. This is a good question about the internal REF practices and policies. For those of you who are from the United Kingdom, REF means Research Evaluation Framework. And it happens every 6 or 7 years in this country. And the next one is happening in 2021. What it means, as they constantly revise the rules for it, is that all research active members of the department will submit between 2 and 6 writings each, which is a decision for the professoriate of the department and the school. So you will be expected over a period of time either to have written and published or be writing and publishing in the next coming period 2 excellent articles or up to 6 excellent articles. And then these will be selected and chosen and submitted for this research evaluation exercise. How do we decide what is excellent? We read everything. We have a committee in the department which reads candidates, applicants' submissions, and we grade them, just like you grade student work. And we also mentor people to help them strengthen their research and writings, and we sometimes provide support. The sabbatical policy in the school is quite generous. It's 1 term after every 8 terms to which you're entitled, which does help to allow you to do more writing in a concentrated period than you might be able to do when you're also teaching. So our practices, we like to believe, are transparent, open, we're widely discussed in departmental meetings. The actual choices and the reasons for the choices, of course, are confidential between the head of the department and an individual researcher. So we certainly don't publish the results of these review exercises by individual, but we do manage the process. It's unlike systems in some other parts of the world that are being introduced. It's not metrics driven. So it isn't based on how many citations your paper has had. It's on real human being reading of papers and judgments made on that basis. And so is the overall ref process itself. I hope that answers.
And just as, again, as Robin is reading through the additional questions, we'll take one more additional question in the queue. Our last one in the queue is with reference to UOA, which is an acronym that I am not familiar with, but we'll take one more question after that. We're at 9:55 here, so we just have 5 minutes.
Okay, let me take the ref one first, which unit of assessment, and for those of you who are not from the UK, that means basically which category for research evaluation do you fit into. We go into unit of assessment 34, which is the communication, culture, media, communication and culture and information science and library science 1. I know that there's unit of assessment number 33, which has been set up this year in order to attract work from the arts and more the arts and humanities, creative arts. So our department will go to 34 because we are heavily oriented towards the social sciences and towards theory and empirical research in that area. In the past, we have not submitted practice-oriented research. If by that you mean making things, making films, we have submitted research which is quite applied and empirically grounded, which is not quite the same as practice. So I hope that answers that. Yep.
And we have one question before that about the personal interview. How does a personal interview work? And this is if you were shortlisted and invited for an interview. How does a personal interview work? Is there a presentation / short lecture planned?
Yes, there is. Usually the day before, I think it's up to an hour for the presentation and Q&A. Happens before the whole department, and we ask you to talk about your research strengths and interests, and then also what you might bring to the department in terms of teaching your own course, a research-led course of your own. The personal interview typically happens the next day and happens with a chair of the panel who is from outside the department, 2 people who come from related departments, and then in this case, myself and one other colleague from the senior colleague from the department will be on the interview panel. It isn't like North America where it takes weeks and weeks and weeks, as I understand it, to decide what the outcome of all of this was. You'll typically hear the results within at most 2 or 3 days. and sometimes the same evening. And I don't see any other questions. I think we've got to the end.
I think we've gotten to the end of the questions. Again, I want to draw your attention, if you are in the chat room, there are some additional documents that are linked that explain things like the interview expenses and the relocation policy. Again, I want to draw your attention to making sure that you read through all of the documents that we've provided online regarding this position. And I would also like to end by saying this is absolutely a wonderful place to work. It's been a very welcoming environment. We have a great support staff, and I think generally a really collegial environment here. And we're excited about welcoming equally enthusiastic and collegial coworkers. And we will be hosting another webinar at 4 p.m. British Summer Time next week, the 11th of October. Robin, is there anything else that you want to end with?
No, I don't think so, except to thank everybody for their questions and for participating. And we look forward to seeing applications should you put them in. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone.